So, what you pouring tonight?
Pulling out some Templeton rye here from my cabinet.
Oh yeah, that's that good cork sound.
Yes, it is. Ooh, I'm gonna have to get more of you.
Oh,
Who drank all my whiskey?
well, I woke up this morning and all of a sudden my pants were wet and all my whiskey was gone. The fuck happened here? All I remember was, oh right. Hi, and welcome to the Subject of Blackout. My name is Timo, and I'm here once again with Mike Marshall from the Name Taken podcast. How you doing, Mike?
Good, Tim.
So this week, not a whole lot of new stuff was coming out. We're still waiting on big movies to return. Hopefully this summer that's going to pick back up. So instead, you convinced me to watch Waterworld, and I would I would just like to say you actually watched this movie this week, right? This wasn't some sick joke that you were playing on me.
I mean, I've seen Waterworld more than once, possibly two, possibly three times. So,
do you think you've seen Waterworld more times than Kevin Costner?
I bet Kevin Costner has watched it a ton of times. Based on interviews he's done about it, I bet he's watched it a bunch. I've watched it more times than Zack Snyder's Justice League.
Well, that was a half of a time. So,
yeah.
So I ended up watching it today. I was a little behind schedule. I thought I was going to do it last night, and then I just completely forgot about it.
Right.
Which I'm happy about because I was watching it today, and fuck you.
Yeah. It's a pile of shit. It's great.
I mean,
before we get into it, though, there's this one scene just to talk about Kevin Costner's breadth as an actor in this movie. There's one scene
bad.
Where his boat gets like totally trashed. It's like toward the end. His boat gets totally trashed, and he'd been underwater for like 2 or 3 hours while this was going on. So he comes back up and looks at the damage, and his reaction. I've done this like a few times by myself, so I'm going to repeat it. It was like this: my boat.
Yeah,
my boat.
He's terrible at this. I was pleasantly surprised to see that this is the same director from his version of Robin Hood, where he tries on a British accent for the first 3 seconds.
Yeah.
And then he's like, no, I can't do this. I'm not gonna practice or anything. I'm just gonna talk real enunciated. And he kind of goes for that general performance again.
Yeah.
In where at least in this one, he just talks very little, but it's still stilted and like with a half accent on it. No one else has accents. The female lead is just talking straight normal. There's barely any even slang, even though it's the future and no one remembers what land is.
Right. Yeah. Nobody remembers what land is, but like planes still seem to work. There's still like gasoline available.
Yeah.
People still have cigarettes, but nobody knows what like dry land is.
Yeah. How do they make cigarettes? Like, they have to make cigarettes at this point. Like, right? They didn't just find a stockpile of unlimited cigarettes.
It's unclear. And it's not as if there's like a comic book that we can go to be like, I mean, there is, but it doesn't really explain those kinds of details.
Man. Yeah, I mean, let's just get into it. So I watched it today, and I watched it in fits and starts, and I basically fast-forwarded through the last 20 minutes, because nothing in this movie is other than the setting is original or creative.
And even the setting is just like, let's just like Mad Max on like water.
And the movie literally opens up with the big voice guy from every like trailer in the 1990s doing the trailer voice and being like, it's the future. Like, he literally says like, it's the future is one of the first lines of the movie. And then I was stunned. I was watching this on my TV with my sound system. I was stunned to hear how bad the Foley work of like Kevin Costner peeing into a bucket and then like putting it
That's
in
like-
a machine and then drinking it. Like the Foley work is like so bad. It is clear that it is put in later.
So it was nominated for best sound, by the way.
How?
So we're talking about in the opening scene, it pans up from Kevin Costner peeing into by the way, a plastic bottle. No one remembers dry land,
But they have
but
plastic bottles.
bottles still exist.
Correct.
So peeing into a plastic bottle and then like turns it into water. So kind of hearkening to Dune, you know?
Yeah.
But just bad. Not good. But like the thing about well, I mean there's portions of Waterworld that are so bad they're good. And usually those portions are not when Kevin Costner's around, but sometimes they are. Sometimes they are.
So one scene where I enjoyed it and Kevin Costner was in it.
Yep.
Was when toward the end he's on a jet ski because again those still exist even
Those still
though
work.
no one remembers the world.
Yep.
He has already murdered the owner of the jet ski. And so he decides that he's going to sneak up on these guys who were the jet ski guys' friends. And he just goes full speed into one of them and then crashes that guy's corpse into like a pillar and just splatters the guy. And I was like, well, that was actually a pretty great effect. And that was entertaining. And I think the key was Kevin Costner wasn't talking or really visible. It was probably actually a stunt actor.
Could have been a stunt guy. Could have been a stunt Kevin Costner.
And that's why it was probably so great because he was the least likable main character I've seen in a while. He tries to commit murder by throwing a little girl into the ocean. And the movie's like, oh, that's a problem because she can't swim. It's like, no, the boat is going 30 knots and he just threw a little girl into the ocean. She's going to drown. It doesn't matter whether or not, like, she can swim. She can't keep up with the boat. Like, what are you talking about? It's the fact that he's moving at a rapid pace and is going to be far away from her very quickly with no signs he's going to stop or turn around.
Although, also, like, how do you not swim? You live in Waterworld, man. You gotta surely.
She's from the land, man. That's why. Even though she's been in Waterworld for most of her life and just never figured it out.
I mean, it's still an island. It's surrounded by water. I just feel like it would have come up, right? Like, this is something that you should learn because, you know, you live in Waterworld.
Oh, that's the other thing. When they decide... So this movie's, like, 1995?
Yeah.
So Jurassic Park came out in 1993, and they just used the
same
shot
island,
of
right?
Isla Sorna.
Yeah.
Yeah. And they're like,
Yeah.
welcome to Jurassic Park. I was like, what? You couldn't find a different island? Like, it's the exact same shot as the first shot of visiting the park in Jurassic Park.
Yeah, they just, like, edited out the pterodactyls.
I was like, what? Guys, this movie legendarily cost like $200 million when movies didn't cost $200 million. And granted, there's a lot of like practical effects and like all of those sets are real. And that's really cool.
Yeah.
And I mean, just to prove how limited CGI was, the underwater scenes where he goes and shows, I don't know, his sex slave captive lady.
That the relationship was very, very strange. Yeah.
Yeah.
And definitely of a particular era that we now look on and we're like,
Oh, that's... You didn't write a character. You wrote an object. Okay.
Yeah.
Interesting.
Dude, there's a whole scene where he gets like super indignant, like I'm trying to access some of Kevin Costner's zeal.
I wouldn't.
In this
he doesn't have zeal.
In this key scene in the movie where he's like, there's no dry land. Like, I'll show you where dirt comes from. Like, everyone's like super into dirt. They're like, yo, Kevin Costner, where'd you get all that dirt? He's like, I'll show you. I'll show you where dirt comes from. And then like takes her in a diving bell, which apparently he has. Takes her in a diving bell down to, I don't know what like
random city,
Miami.
And nothing like, distinct, but there's a submarine in it.
And it's like, and he's like, yeah, like all of human civilization is, 800 meters below. the surface of Waterworld. But the explanation given in the beginning, like the problem with the movie is it does too much to explain what's going on. Snowpiercer does very little to explain what's going on, except that Snowpiercer is just sort of like, there's a class disparity and people are going to hack their way to the front of a train. And you're like, got it.
And a thing happened, and now we all live on a train that goes around the world. Okay, cool. I don't need to know what the thing is. I don't need big voice guy from the 90s to be like, in the future.
Yeah.
Waterworld
over-explains.
Wet.
Yeah. And like Waterworld's explanation is like the polar ice caps melt, so the entire world, with the exception of like the Himalayan mountains, are like plunged underwater.
If you do simple math.
I don't think the science checks out on that.
No,
I'm no expert.
An asteroid made entirely of water also hit Earth, and it was enough.
Yeah, from like Mario Galaxy. Yeah, no, I mean, I'm no Kevin Costner, so
no,
I don't know.
You have emotions and feelings, and when you read things, I can stand to listen to them.
I mean, see, you know, another thing about Waterworld. Another thing about Waterworld is Dennis Hopper was making some career choices in the 90s.
Oh, boy, yeah.
Especially as he kept like lining up these really odd villain roles, and like the first one I'm thinking of is Mario. He was Bowser. And
my God.
And then he was this dude in Waterworld. He was
the bad guy in Speed. It was crazy.
And he was the bad guy in Speed. Yeah.
And he's in True Romance as well as a crazy villain. Yeah. And that's 1993. The mid-90s, Dennis Hopper was like, all right, I played a drunken Hoosiers. Now I'm going to just chew scenery for a decade.
Right. Dude was in Easy Rider. He was an Easy Rider, man. I mean, like...
he was also in Apocalypse Now.
Sure, yep.
Famously. I mean, I don't know what
Apocalypse Now, Mario Brothers.
You know.
Easy Rider,
Speed. Your usual career path.
Waterworld.
Where you're in seminal, important films that define new genres of cinema. And then you're in Super Mario Brothers and Waterworld. As one does.
Yes. I don't think we've ever made this connection, but Dennis Hopper is the Nicolas Cage of the 80s and 90s.
Good Lord. Yeah, you're not wrong. I would have to deep dive to see if he's done as many movies just to get cash as Nicolas Cage was. Maybe he's more financially sound than Nicolas Cage.
Maybe he's like, crap, I bought all these dinosaur bones. now I have to be in Mario Brothers.
I thought we'd use him. Yeah. This performance is like, he's interesting. Like that's the thing, is like, it's bad and it's a dumb role and it feels like he's in a different movie than Kevin Costner is.
Yep. It
feels like Kevin Costner thinks that this is like a serious treatise on what the world would be like with civilization gone, and he's the man.
Kevin Costner was making cinema.
Yeah, he's the man who still has a code that he lives by. And sure, he's a half fish mutant because he has gills behind his ears and his feet look weird. But like, he still has honor, and he won't sleep with the lady in the film unless she wants to be slept with.
Yeah, that was weird. He's like, women, man. Yeah, Kevin Costner's really the Mary Sue of the movie that he was the key producer for. Let's just point that out, that there are a couple points in the movie where like women are just sort of being offered to Kevin Costner, and he's like,
I don't want it real unless she wants it. Like, what? That's creepy.
I want to be loved. I'm down to like yell at this 9-year-old for using my crayons, but
dude,
I just want our love to be real.
It's such a bizarre performance in a movie that also features like a comic book villain who, wears a chin strap for an eyepiece.
Yeah. I bet the set design and the costume design was probably really fun. I bet whoever had that job, who was also just sort of like, here's a blank check,
Yeah, like the idea of like, hey, what's a cool thing that's super mundane in our world, but in the future might, be crazy, and he
Boats,
yeah, he tries to trick
water.
He's like bribing these kids by showing them rear view mirrors. And they're like, the reflective glass, where did you find it? It's like, you don't have mirrors? You don't know what mirrors are? But plastic bottles still exist. Like, what the fuck is going on? Anyway. Yeah, no, I thought there were a lot of bizarre choices in the acting. Again,
Yep.
there were some halfway decent set pieces.
Yep.
But I think, we talked about Dennis Hopper as well, but I think the person who stole the scenes was Jack Black, plays the pilot in this.
That was Jack Black?
Mike, not only was that Jack Black, the first noise he made, because he doesn't have lines, he just makes noises. The first noise he made, I was like, yo, that guy sounds a lot like Jack Black. Wait, this is the mid-90s when Jack Black actually kind of had a very small but serious movie career.
Yeah.
I wonder if this is
trying.
Jack Black. And I went to the IMDb, and he is playing the pilot and is in two scenes. The scene with the pilot flying around the ship, and then the next scene where he's just in the background making Jack Black noises and like making Jack Black faces. And it's like, this guy was on the path to Jumanji from the beginning. Like, this guy makes hilarious noises. We got to get him in some sort of role. I don't know, make him the pilot. But the pilot doesn't have any lines. Well, he'll just make noises. It's like, that Jack Black was typecast, even in this movie, is just like, go make us laugh.
And like, that like a producer was watching Waterworld, like, get him on the phone. I'm making this movie called Nacho Libre. And he would be perfect.
Oh, God.
My timeline's off. My timeline's off with that.
A little bit. No, as soon as I saw Jack Black in it, I was like, this is fucking hilarious. Like, why? How do you get Jack Black in one of the worst movies I've ever seen? It was spectacular. It was a nice little, because that came about, I'd say, an hour into the movie, or at least what felt like an hour. And it was just a nice little morsel, like, hey, continue watching this because maybe somebody else hilarious will show up. Unfortunately, nothing else good happened the rest of the movie. Again, there's these decent ideas and cool set pieces, and then just Kevin Costner shits all over them. Why was Kevin Costner a thing, Mike?
Kevin Costner, yeah. Question mark.
Like, he made two decent baseball movies, or baseball adjacent movies.
Field of Dreams and
Bull Durham.
Okay.
And
did a bunch of different stuff. Did a couple Western type movies with Silverado and Dances with Wolves.
Dances with Wolves, also legendarily long
directed.
And bad.
He got an Academy Award for directing Dances with Wolves.
I have not seen it. Is Kevin?
We should just do a Kevin Costner podcast and just go through his deep and varied catalog of films.
Subject to Blackout is now a Kevin Costner podcast.
Subject to Costner. This week we discuss The Bodyguard.
I do not go deep on Kevin Costner films, but other than the two baseball ones where he's not the reason those movies are good, it's either other characters or just excellent writing. But then, like, Robin Hood, this.
Oh, yeah, Robin Hood. Yeah, I forgot about that one.
Postman, the mailman.
Postman, yeah, Postman? Which is also a post-apocalyptic movie, like on land.
Who decided that he's allowed to be a movie star? Like, who authorized his movie star status in the 90s?
The 90s were a really weird time, especially for action stars. Like, everyone forgets, but Michael Keaton was Batman.
Yeah, but
he was
Batman in a Tim Burton Batman movie. Like, it was all weird. Batman was also murdering people like he was Ben Affleck again. Johnny
Depp wasn't old enough. Helena Bonham Carter wasn't married to Tim Burton yet.
She
couldn't have been Catwoman. In retrospect, we're getting a little bit away from Kevin Costner, which is sad because we could talk about Kevin Costner for about 2 hours, but continuing on the 90s Batman thing, like, when you think about it, the only so Michael Keaton was Batman twice.
Correct.
He was sort of for a James Bond comparison, he was sort of the Sean Connery of this iteration of Batman. And then Batman Forever was Val Kilmer.
Correct.
Yeah.
And I Will Fight People, I like that movie.
I got to go back and watch it. So that was Val Kilmer and that was Jim Carrey, 90s cast. It was Nicole Kidman was the female lead, I think.
Correct.
And then it was Jim Carrey as the Riddler and Tommy Lee Jones as Two-Face.
Yes, and Tommy Lee Jones played Two-Face as though he were playing the Joker.
Did.
And Jim
really
Carrey played the Riddler as though he were the Joker.
Yeah.
So it was just like, hey, what if we just have two Jokers? Well, we can't do that. We already used Joker and killed him off. Okay, we'll call them different people, but we're just going to do two Jokers. And I think that's why it's great, is because they're both trying to outdo each other in craziness. And it's hilarious to watch Tommy Lee Jones try to keep up with Jim Carrey in his prime.
Jim Carrey was just coming off of Ace Ventura and The Mask.
Yeah.
He was fine.
He was like, yo, I am absolutely going to do the craziest, wildest, most exaggerated shit. And Tommy Lee Jones is like, well, I'm not going to get fucking upstaged. I'm Tommy Lee Jones. God damn it. That movie's great.
So I think in that sense, because Val Kilmer had done Tombstone, and he'd done
The Doors.
Yeah, and he did Heat, right?
Yes,
and Top Gun. So he was more of a traditional action person. Yeah. But then we get back to kind of like a Michael Keaton sort of like, or a Kevin Costner in Batman and Robin with George Clooney.
Yeah.
Being a sort of George Lazenby. And I mean, that in my opinion is the best of the 90s Batman movies, because the whole time is just Arnold Schwarzenegger just snapping off ice related puns the entire movie. He's like, "Ice to meet you."
You need to chill.
Exactly. It's the whole movie. It's great.
Yeah.
And Uma Thurman, hot off of Pulp Fiction, as Poison Ivy, playing it up like
also playing it like she were the Joker.
half like the Joker and half like she's it's like Sunset Boulevard, like some like old school
there's
golden age.
There's that like golden age accent. She's like, how you doing, darling?
Exactly, that kind of Katharine Hepburn sort of vibe.
That movie is, the plot is just atrocious, but there are some entertaining things, and again, watching actors enjoy themselves is always fun, and that's what makes that Arnold Schwarzenegger thing very fun. And that's what Kevin Costner doesn't have, is any fucking fun.
He's not fun. Is he? I mean, he isn't really. He's never fun. I honestly, I will admit, I like Field of Dreams.
Yeah, it's a good movie.
It's a good movie, but because like he's kind of like required to play it straight and be sort of like bewildered and confused the whole time. Like that's his character, so it sort of makes sense.
Yeah, and his wife is a very animated character. So
she is. Who was that actress? She was great in them.
But yeah, she's a nice foil to him.
That's a well cast movie.
And then James Earl Jones. We have
James Earl Jones. Yeah,
we have one scene where a character needs to wax so deeply poetic about baseball, and we just need a voice, and they're like, oh, let's give Darth Vader. Let's fucking go for it. Yeah, and like,
where is my son Akeem?
But there's also like this thing where it's like baseball and like Americana is like intrinsically like related to conservatism in this country, but then that movie also layers on the fact that like James Earl Jones's character is like an author who was controversial, and conservatives want his books banned, and Kevin Costner's wife is fighting to prevent books from being banned because she's like, these are neo-fascists and we need to stop these people. So like it's a great movie because it successfully intertwines like Americana and fighting for like liberal ideas of like freedom of, speech and expression, and then like it stays out of American politics by doing them both at the same time, and just makes the movie about baseball without making it political.
Baseball. I mean, the politics of it add depth instead of kind of obfuscate the point of the movie. So, by the way, I did look while you were talking. Amy Madigan was his wife. She was like somebody who I feel like was in a bunch of movies in like the late 80s and early 90s. But yeah, the politics of them being farmers as being kind of like these 60s hippies, like these kind of versus the rest of their kind of Iowa County, who are a little bit more conservative and traditional, is like kind of a cool point of conflict that like doesn't, it just sort of like adds to it's an opportunity to provide depth to the characters. It's not something that's becomes overbearing. But, you know, now that I'm thinking about it, like Kevin Costner does pretty well when he's doing adaptations of books. Like Dances with Wolves, we should go back and watch it. But I mean, he won Best Director for directing himself, probably one of his most challenging roles.
Yeah, I've never seen it
because he's probably a dick on set.
Probably. So seems like a dick on screen too. So
yeah, so he was probably really tough to direct. Well, as Kevin Costner.
Yeah.
But like that was an adaptation of a book. Field of Dreams also an adaptation of a book.
You know what else he's in? He's fucking Superman's dad in the Justice League, or not the Justice League, but Zack Snyder's cinematic universe. He's Superman's dad, who's just like, I'm in a tornado, don't save me, because people might find out you're Superman. So I'm just gonna die now. Just gonna get ripped apart by this tornado. And it's like, Kevin Costner just isn't fun in anything. Yeah. Like the closest he gets to fun, and I haven't seen Dancing with Wolves. But the closest he gets, the closest he gets to fun is like his wife is fun in a movie, or like other players on a baseball team are also fun in a movie that he's in.
He's fun adjacent. Yeah, he's not fun. Yeah, he's not fun.
And that's the biggest problem is like if they're clearly building in Waterworld.
Glad we brought it back.
They're clearly trying to make him this larger than life ethos. This little girl towards the end starts espousing like he can hide in the shadows of a noon sun, and you know, like all of this like he only is heard if he wants to be heard, and he can hear a mile and see 10 miles underwater. It's like,
yeah,
but like then there's all of this ethos that's being built up, and none of the previous movie has showed any of that to be true.
He's never been demonstrated to be likable. And like, I think what they were going for is like, he's difficult, but he has a heart of gold.
But they just don't establish it.
And they don't. Yeah.
They're like, we didn't put in the work, but now we're like, they do the hero shot of him like showing up in the bad guy's boat at the end. And you're just like, no, that guy, like what that speech should have been was like, he's overprotective of his crayons. Like, he doesn't like anyone. He drinks his own urine. Like, all of that is true. Everything she said about him is some bullshit that she's hoping is true. Even at the end, there's a character who he kind of interacts with a few times throughout the film, who's a bad guy. And the bad guy gets the jump on him and is pointing his gun at him and is like, you should have, bought me that drink, loser, and like pulls the trigger. And it's not through any guile or sort of great brilliance by Kevin Costner that he gets out of the situation. It's just the gun doesn't fire. Right. So then Kevin Costner just murders him in cold blood with his own gun. It's like, what? Why am I supposed to like this character? He just got lucky. Like, that's it. Like, he's not smart. He didn't, like, there was no callback to, like, an earlier reference of, like, that guy can't count or something, and he thought he had another bullet. Like, there's just nothing, and it's like, here's our triumphant hero, and he wins because another guy's gun doesn't work. Like, boy, man, I think Kevin Costner's complete lack of charisma hurts the character.
Yeah, that's a good sentence. That's a real good sentence. I'd agree with that.
But also, the writing is doing him no favors by not portraying him in any sort of in any sort of light that makes him heroic leading up to his big heroic moment. He's just like kind of a pissy, whiny asshole to everyone.
Yeah.
And then all of a sudden saves the little girl, so we're supposed to like him?
Yeah, I mean, I guess it was also the 90s. Like I don't necessarily want to throw privilege in here, but like I think some people just assumed that he was a white dude, so we were just gonna identify with him. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And that we would just kind of be chill with sort of like him being difficult because we would like get it. I didn't really get it. I didn't get it. I don't think audiences got it in 1995 either.
Well, and so we watched the hour and 20-minute cut that was on Netflix, and is now,
there's a Zack Snyder cut. Is there a longer cut?
there's a director's cut that is 40 minutes longer.
I would watch it. I would still watch it. I would sit down and watch it tonight even.
You go right ahead. I actually also read Roger Ebert's review of this movie.
Yeah.
And it was basically like, it looked pretty at times, and some of the set pieces were cool. And he's like, and the rest was boring, and I'll never watch it again. And I think that is a fair assessment.
I agree, yeah.
But he even, I think in the Roger Ebert thing, he goes into the fact that like there's supposedly a much longer version of this movie, which the studio cut down. And I would assume that the studio also tacked on the big voice guy saying like, it's the future. Because I think that detracts from the film, because it's just like, you watch the Universal Studios logo flood from the ice caps melting. Like, that's how the movie begins. And it just feels like a trailer. And it feels tacked on and stupid. And if that didn't happen, if you didn't know that we were on Earth before they go down and you see all the buildings under the water, like, that would have been much more interesting. But instead, they just went with, like, audiences are confused. Let's just have the trailer guy record some intro.
I think that's a fair point. I mean, because there was a lot of executive meddling happening in science fiction in the 90s that made a lot of science fiction movies make less sense because executives are stupid and don't understand the audiences that are actually watching their films. Now, granted, in Waterworld's case, one of those executives meddling was Kevin Costner.
That is true.
So we can't be sure how much of this is Kevin Costner's fault, but like The Matrix is a fantastic example of executive meddling and changing the premise of why people are sort of like plugged into this computer thing, right? That they're like batteries, when instead in the original script it was sort of like a processor. Like the executive meddling led to a large kind of like plot hole and world building issue where people were asking the question, well, why wouldn't you just use like cows?
Yeah.
Why would you bother with humans when you can use anything?
We're extremely efficient at turning food and matter into energy, and we don't expend a lot of heat doing it. Yeah. And then they're like, we use them as a heat source. It's like, well, that's fucking stupid. Right. Like, there are plenty of much greater heat sources than a bunch of human beings in a giant machine. Yeah. So yeah, that's this movie feels meddled with. I don't think I could stomach a 40-minute longer, a 2-hour and 40-minute version of this movie.
I want the Zack Snyder cut of Waterworld. That's what I want.
I would love
Zack Snyder's Waterworld.
I would love for you to watch it and tell me if it's any better or if it's just longer, which is what I assume it would be.
I hope it's just 40 minutes of like Kevin Costner just sort of like silently like pulling riggings on sails and just sort of like brooding at sunsets and like stuff like that.
That's one of those things. When Kevin Costner is acting with people, he doesn't feel like a human being.
No.
But when they do that shot at the beginning when he's like bartering with some guy and then realizes that like he stole his limes, so he like, unfurls his the actual dimensions of his ship, and like his mask goes shooting into the air, and all of his
a lot of swashbuckling.
Yeah,
A whole lot of swashbuckling. Yeah.
All of a sudden, he's got all these sails, and the jib is swinging over his head, and he's just casually ducking out of the way. It's like, all right, this is rather cinematic, and he like gets on the side of his catamaran or whatever kind of boat that is.
Dude, I'm so glad we're using all these nautical terms.
He's like turning around and like swinging the
starboard, port, just like all the sides. Yeah, just all over the place.
He goes to both sides. He's port and starboard.
Yeah, there's knots.
So he's going several knots. You can tell.
Yeah.
No, and like that was like, all right, this is entertaining. Like this isn't plot based, but this is a good little boat themed action sequence. That's cool. And then the movie just gets bogged down by like, well, we got to have a nude scene. So I don't know. Make her offer herself in like for sex as opposed to getting murdered. It's like, if he has sex with you, he can still murder you. Like, there's nothing to stop him from doing that in that order or any order he sees fit. Like,
one other thing, and I guess this is minor, but we're picking it apart, is that like it was a PG-13 movie, and they did have their one F word, and it was used like at a really completely boring moment. It was just like kind of a like it was used by some kind of side character. Yeah, it wasn't even like in a death. It was just sort of like a surprise.
I remember hearing it, and then I was like,
"There it is.
Oh,
that's the one."
No, so I didn't know what this was rated when it came out.
Yeah.
And I was like, oh, I guess this is rated R because you don't use your one fuck on that.
Yeah. You do, apparently.
They did. Probably again because their real F word was, used in something that probably got cut out. But I thought it really was apparent later on, like, oh, no, this must be PG-13 because Dennis Hopper's character, who has murdered, his compatriots, he's, basically thrown people under the bus so he could live. He's talking about murdering a girl and like sacrificing her and like skinning her back. And like, this is a little girl, like 8 to 10 years old or something. And he's doing all of the shit. And then in the big climactic scene, he's like, get that frickin' R word. And, it was the 90s. So they said that R word.
You could use that word.
I won't on this podcast because I'm not trying to get canceled. But he says frickin'. And it's like, just don't say frickin'. Like, if you can't use another fuck, don't say frickin', because that's just like,
that's weird.
Wah, 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 we don't have an R rating. It's such a bizarre choice.
So, but you brought up this portion. We haven't even talked about this part of the plot, this central part of the plot yet, because we've been focused on, Kevin Costner's involvement and performance. But so the MacGuffin in this movie is that there's a 9-year-old girl who has a half back tattoo that people really want to figure out or puzzle out, that because it provides coordinates to find like the only dry land that's left in the world. Now, my question is, why would you tattoo it on a 9-year-old girl when there are so many other ways to share that kind of information?
I think the movie wants to say that girl is the child of the 2 skeletons we find on the island at the end.
Right. Yes. Yeah. So her parents, spoiler, but her parents were for some reason on dry land, tattooed her back with the coordinates. So it's not like a treasure hunt or like a scavenger hunt where there's like a list of prompts. It's like longitude and latitude. She could have memorized it. She could have memorized it.
Because she remembers what trees look like and animals and like all of this shit. And that's what she's drawing with Kevin Costner's crayons, much to his chagrin.
Yeah.
And so she remembers all of these things.
So what? Yeah.
So she was obviously a certain age, but she doesn't remember that she's ever been on dry land, despite like remembering what a horse is. And then she's given this like let's say that she is too young to remember it, which again doesn't make sense according to the language of the film. Like, why would you? That's so frustrating. The other thing about it is like all of these people have copies of this tattoo. Like there's this old man character. Well, I don't know what his relationship to anyone in this fucking movie is because this movie does not care. He has drawn a copy of her exact tattoo, and yet everyone is like, well, we have to kill her so we can keep looking at this. It's like, just fucking put a piece of paper on her and just start drawing.
Tracing it.
Like, what the fuck?
Yeah, everyone was real confused about that tattoo. I didn't get it. Yeah.
Yeah, it was so bizarre. And just another thing about the parents. So the parents tattooed their daughter to give the coordinates out to the world, I guess.
Yeah.
And so
with Japanese characters, by the way, so we don't even know if it's actually coordinates. They could have screwed up and it says like bite the wax tadpole. We don't even know if they know Japanese. You know, like they were like, it should say serenity, but actually, you know, it says like refrigerator. We don't know.
So the parents then ostensibly must have put her on a boat and been like, well, I hope you run into another person and you don't die and your skin falls off and no one ever finds out about us.
Yeah, and we're just going to go back to our hut and neatly lay next to each other.
They
and
just
die.
laid next to each other and put some shit on themselves and some flowers. And we're like, well, let's just lay here until we die now. Because otherwise someone buried them. And I don't know who that someone is.
Yeah. And just like get covered in cobwebs.
Yeah.
Because there's like spiders everywhere, I guess. You know, let me know what you think about this, but I think one good reason to spend time on and scrutinizing Waterworld is that because it's like pretty mediocre, mediocre too bad, it would be a fantastic candidate for rebooting or redeveloping even as like a Netflix series and doing it well.
Yeah, I don't want a series of this. I want a movie that's coherent. I want the Mad Max Fury Road of this movie.
Yeah, because there'd actually be ways to do this that would be cool. And then it's another example of just like remaking a Disney movie in CGI and we all have to see the same movie but done poorly. Yeah. You know, like there's something to be said for actually remaking movies that weren't well received the first time around.
But had decent like bone structure to them.
Yeah. Like what? Yeah, go ahead.
Again, the concept of Waterworld, I mean, you couldn't do it because Waterworld exists, but like if you redid this thing and just didn't say, hey, we're on Earth, you know, this is the thing. And then there was like a Planet of the Apes reveal of like, you fucking blew it up. You know?
Yeah, you could totally get away with that. That would be fine.
That'd be super. That would be a interesting idea. And this movie is devoid of any interesting ideas.
Yeah, like one of the things, this sounds kind of counterintuitive, but roll with me on this. But one of the things I was thinking about is, I think making the MacGuffin be dry land was a bad call. I think it's so obvious, and it means that like everybody's on a very particular and obvious and kind of one-dimensional track for the entirety of the movie. I think involving dry land from the get-go and having conflict, like actual conflict around using it, be kind of part of the backdrop, and having like a bigger driving force that would have been more complicated and nuanced would have made the movie interesting.
Yeah, I think if you set up where like there is land, but it's, you know, it's arid and there's, you know, you can't grow much of any crops.
Yeah.
And, you know, there's still a lack of fresh water in this world.
Yeah.
Like that's interesting. And then there's a rumor of an island where it's entirely green and lush and full of fresh water. And that's the myth. That's the myth that they're going for. Not that land exists, but in fact that like usable, you know, livable land exists. And so the fight, again, like Mad Max, is like for resources and stuff.
Right.
As opposed to, well, we have to find land because that solves all of our problems because reasons.
Right.
Yeah. I think we just wrote a much better movie. A much more interesting movie.
I agree. Yeah. So different plot. Kevin Costner's not in it. CGI the fish.
Kevin Costner's in it, but we kill him in the first 13 seconds.
Like a Friday the 13th movie where the survivor of the previous movie just like dies before the credits roll out.
Oh yeah.
Boom.
Yeah.
Now that'll never happen because Kevin Costner owns the rights.
Ooh.
Still down to talk about Waterworld. There are interviews that he's done as recently as like, I don't know, a few years ago where he was like, I think it's like I've seen it many times. I think it's robust as a science fiction movie. Very exotic, robust.
Sorry, this is an audio medium. The audience could not hear me rolling my eyes.
Yeah.
But I want it made clear that is not true. That's not true. This movie is not robust.
So I think he has, I guess the word is respect. I think he has enough respect for the original film that he said he would never allow like a sequel to happen. So, I mean, I'm sure there's a price point where somebody could buy the rights to Waterworld, but I think that means it's high.
Yeah, so there's this trend in film, and it's not super original. It's not new to this era of filmmaking, but it is more common than I think it's ever been, where they do like the 20 years later sequel.
Mm-hmm.
And, you know, for better or for worse, a lot of them are more in line with Coming to America, where it's like just kind of running back the same movie and, you know, living in a world with the same characters again. But like there's also movies like Mad Max Fury Road and Blade Runner 2049, which I have seen Blade Runner and I've seen Blade Runner 2049, and I will tell you which one is a better film. And it's the second one.
All right.
In my opinion.
And thus we enter the second hour. Go ahead. Tell me why it's a better movie. I'm interested.
I think I mean, some of it is the limitations of the time that Blade Runner was made.
Can our friendship withstand the things that you're about to slander Blade Runner with?
Blade Runner doesn't look great compared to modern cinema.
Oh my God.
Whereas Blade Runner 2049, I think, is one of the most beautiful films I've seen in years.
You disgust me. It was great, but like Blade Runner 1980 was supposed to look like a noir.
Yeah,
it had those like beautiful, like
that's
those
not
long,
my problem.
Smoky
that's not my
shots.
problem. My problem is not the cinematic choices, which are all great. I think the weird pyramid is cool, and I think the old scientist guy living
Tyrell.
Yeah, his whole like building is cool. The streets are excellent. Like all of that stuff fucking rocks. But it looks bad when you see like a composited flying spaceship over like it doesn't look good because that was the best they could do.
Would you feel better if George Lucas came in and special editioned it?
Yes, if he could just put like more bands singing that are entirely CGI. No, I mean it looks worse, and I can't not like the first time I saw that movie was 4 or 5 years ago. I can't not think of that movie without being like, oh man, I wish the special effects were better back then. But like that's not my main problem. My main problem is, and I don't know which cut I've seen because I just saw it on one of the streaming services.
Did you see it with Harrison Ford voiceover?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. You saw the cinematic cut. You need to see the director's cut without the voiceover, where there's just sort of like long silent sequences in there.
See, that's
brilliant.
So both movies are slow. Both movies are intentionally slow.
Yeah.
I think Blade Runner, without the intensely spectacular visuals, because again, not that they weren't attempted, but because they just aren't what I expect in modern film. It's a criticism that is not fair to the film because I didn't see it at the time of its release when it would have looked amazing. But I just feel like that film is, and especially the cut that I saw, slower and more boring, and I didn't like the scene where he goes enhance 28:43 enhance.
Yeah.
For 9 straight
It's like
minutes.
the first time that ever happened.
I know.
It's like,
and that's great. That's great. Seeing where that like meme came from.
And it's like,
but he does it for 8 minutes straight.
Yeah. It's awesome.
Terrible.
It's a mood. The whole movie is a mood, as the young people say.
I would, there is stuff
and
like
that. Vangelis soundtrack.
Yeah, all good. This is a good movie. I don't dislike the movie. I just think the second one improves on it in that.
Oh gosh.
I think it improves on it in that the main character
Ryan Gosling.
goes through America's sweetheart, and probably Canada's too.
Harrison Ford. Ooh, is he Canadian?
No,
Oh,
but
okay.
Canada just probably wants them some Ryan Gosling. Is all I'm saying. Like, who wouldn't?
Right.
I'll tell you who, and that's Portugal. They fucking hate him.
Fuck Portugal.
No, but Ryan Gosling's character, I think, goes through a extremely interesting arc.
I agree with that.
Whereas Harrison Ford's character, unless you take into account the wishy-washy, is he a replicant or not, which Harrison Ford didn't even want to be part of the movie.
Right. I didn't want him to be part of it either.
The only person who wanted it to be a part of the movie was the director.
Yeah,
and everyone's like, just don't listen to him. He's an idiot. He's wrong. Like, I know it's his thing, but he's wrong. But I think, like, Harrison Ford doesn't really go through an arc in that movie. Like,
no. But
whereas Ryan Gosling as the main character, you're like, oh my God, he's the guy. And then, you know, things happen and like he loses people. Whereas Harrison Ford, again, it's a really good movie. It's a little slow for my liking. And Harrison Ford's character is just kind of along for the ride.
Yeah. Okay.
And those are my biggest issues with it. But my point being is that there is a way to do a much later sequel which can not diminish the original in any way and can exceed in some ways the original premise and I think in turn make the first one better.
Yeah. I mean, you know, there's a few things here. The first thing is I have to go watch the original Blade Runner again.
That is fair.
For what the smut and trash that you've spoken about that masterpiece. The second thing, how dare you invoke Blade Runner when we're talking about Waterworld? How dare you?
Yeah, I'm
the third thing. Fair. The third thing, one of the major issues that I have with Blade Runner 2049 isn't necessarily is the movie's fault, but the culture of like you said, you know, of coming to America, Tokyo Drift, of like doing these movies 20 or 30 years like down the line, is that the pleasure of the plot of Blade Runner was that Harrison Ford's story was left somewhat ambiguous, and it was up to the
unless
audience.
You watch the director's cut.
It's still ambiguous as to who's what.
I guess.
Like I don't want to spoil it, but there's like a certain degree of ambiguity around certain details of the movie that like were part of a debate about the plot for until 2049. But at no point was anybody clamoring for a sequel to clarify it. It was the ambiguity was the joyful part. So it makes me
I would
angry.
argue, and I think it's important to remember that 2049 does not weigh in on either side of the ambiguity. I mean, we'd have to get into spoilers for me to make my full point.
We would. I think it weighs in implicitly by having him around in 2049. That's what I would say.
Yes, but all right. If you don't want to know the plot to either one of these movies,
and then in the original Blade Runner, then like who is Edward James Olmos? It's just like ruining the debate. So like 2049, good movie.
I don't think it ruins the debate. And I'm gonna get into it. If you haven't seen either one of these movies, just skip ahead like a minute and a half. Like Harrison Ford is either the first of a kind of replicant that can age, or he is not a replicant. And the second movie does not weigh in on either of those. It says he's here, and there is a wave of replicants that age, because we see that with Dave Bautista.
Mm-hmm.
And so they're like, either he's the first, or he's not one at all. And we don't give a shit about that because we're finding this woman. Like, that's the whole thing. We're finding out the truth about this woman. And that's what the whole plot is about. They want Harrison Ford in the movie because it's fucking Harrison Ford and it's fucking Blade Runner. But they don't care if he's a replicant or not. That's what I took away from the movie, and that's why I enjoyed it so much, because it was like they didn't put a finger on the scale as far as I was concerned.
I will go back and watch. I thought that 2049 was like a visually compelling movie, and it reminded me of AI with Haley Joel Osment. Fuck you still. And then how dare you? Fourth thing, the tears in the rain monologue. You're seriously putting 2049 against like this incredible moment in science fiction film history. Tears in the Rain?
Yeah, it's really good. It's really good. I enjoyed the second one better. Sorry. Both good. Both good.
You know what? I'm sorry too.
Okay, but I think a more apt comparison for this kind of schlocky universe that everyone other than Kevin Costner lived in is Mad Max.
Yeah.
And Mad Max, I have not seen the original Mad Max because it was so culturally everywhere that I feel like I've seen that movie, so I'm not going to spend time sitting down and watching it.
There's a lot of people screaming with Australian accents.
I assumed as much. From what I've heard, many people are like, Mad Max Fury Road is not only a great movie, but much better than the first one. Again, I'm not speaking from knowledge.
I would say in terms of like world building, Mad Max Fury Road is a much more complete movie. Like the original movies, if you're interested in that like kind of B movie aesthetic, they're the top tier of like, you know,
it was a B movie that was
dystopia.
So good that it made it A. Yeah.
So if you like B movies, those are perfect. But in terms of like thoughtful world building and redevelopment, Mad Max Fury Road is definitely like a gold standard, especially in sci-fi.
That's why I think like making a sequel to this and not treading on the first one too much, or just reinterpreting it from the beginning, kind of makes sense to me, because whereas Mad Max was a B movie that was so good it kind of became A, like this is an A movie that just isn't good, so it feels like a B movie. And so like there's that potential there where there's working parts, but it's just not coming together as a functional unit. So I think if you just retooled some stuff, and even if you just came up with a sequel where like Waterworld exists, Kevin Costner's storyline took place, but now people are still struggling, like Finding Land didn't solve all of their problems. That's still a compelling jumping off point. I think it would be better to just be like, fuck it, restart this whole thing. Get someone who isn't fucking Kevin Costner to play captivating character, and make the plot more centralized about like, thinking that one solution will fix all of our problems, and that's not necessarily true. Like, making it less about, like you said, finding land, and more about, the conflicts in between the different factions.
Yeah.
So, Mike, I think that's about as much as anyone can listen to us talk about Waterworld. As far as other pop culture I've consumed recently, I gotta say I've deep dive back into mid-2000s Shins music. I adored those albums when they were released, and we were both very much fans of the Shins until we saw them live.
Oops.
Yeah. And I was going back and listening to like Shoots Too Narrow, the whole album, and their, I want to say their first release as well. And boy, Shoots Too Narrow is a nihilistic album.
It is, yeah.
It's not poppy to the point of like Of Montreal, where it's like this song that is 140 beats per minute and is super danceable is about my chronic depression, how that has made me impotent.
That was a lot of albums at that time,
Like there are several songs where it's like, I had this dream where communism was the world's, dominant.
So Says I.
So Says I. And he's like, yeah, the communism it takes over and everybody's doing communism and that sucks. So we just go back to capitalism and all the problems of capitalism just keep happening. And he's like, and there's no reason to worry about it because they all suck and there's never going to be a good answer and then we die.
Yeah.
Like, it's like, wow, that's so nihilistic. And I loved, like, I would sing along with that song on the radio, drive it in my car.
Yeah.
Like, man, the world is awesome. Listen to this awesome Shins album where he's just talking about how everything sucks and it always will and there's no point in caring. Like,
He's just getting his feelings out. I mean, I do want to tell our audience two things. The first being that for those of you that don't remember 9/11, Shins, pretty critical band in the early to mid to late 2000s, and two, seeing the Shins live is a disappointment at the level of Tim talking about Blade Runner 2049 being a better movie than Blade Runner. That's what seeing them live is like. Let's be honest. That level of disappointment.
I think it was
confusion, disappointment. Just
much like Blade Runner, there were long sets of silence during their
tragic introspection where you're like, what have I... Why am I here?
I just remember seeing them at Lollapalooza one time, and they were all like dressed in the same outfits when they came out.
Yeah,
and they like played like So Says I or something like immediately.
Oh, that's cool. And then like 49 minutes later, you're like, oh, this is okay.
Then they tuned for 3 minutes, and like one of the people who would like 2 years later be like unceremoniously fired from the Shins.
Yeah,
like,
he fired like a bunch of people in that band.
Hey guys, what's going on? And James Mercer is like, don't you talk to them, I'm tuning.
James Mercer is super dour. I was hoping that he would actually it was just the Shins and then in other projects he would be compelling. I did see Broken Bells back in 2010.
Yeah.
And Danger Mouse, cool dude. James Mercer, not impressive on stage. It's just he sucks live.
Yeah, that's disappointing.
Yeah.
There any media that you've been consuming recently out of the blue
aside from Waterworld? Let me think about it. I've been getting back into Animal Crossing. Been doing that
now. So Animal Crossing, you basically just like do life stuff?
Yeah, so Animal Crossing was a game that was made primarily for 9-year-olds in Japan, which is now played by people like me in America who use it as a way to balance out not being able to control their real lives. And 30-year-old unemployed men, single men. And within the game, it's a life simulator where you manage an island and buy extensions to your house and fill it with furniture, catch fish, trade them in for money to acquire other resources. And the nice thing about it is it kind of diverges from real life where everyone's just kind of impressed with you, even if you don't do anything. They're like still impressed with you if you do nothing. So it's not kind of nice just to run around. People are just sort of impressed by you existing, and that's great. So I've been getting back into that, yeah. And I mean, my island's very elaborate. I have many gardens, and I have 2 different neighborhoods that I built up, so you can have 10 different residents there at a time. So I separated them into 2 different areas, one of which has like a very strict HOA, and the other one is a little bit more chill. I was hoping that they were kind of different class backgrounds, so they would fight with each other, and they wouldn't notice that the seat of power is an axis between me and the other businesses, which form a row in the middle of the island. And so, yeah, I've been doing that.
Well, it sounds like you're accomplishing quite a bit.
Yeah, Foucault, and ideas of governmentality and security play critical roles in the social experience of my island, called Fun Island. I named it Fun Island.
I'm conducting a socio-ecological experiment upon my residents on Fun Island.
It's real. Yeah, it's real. Now that the pandemic's kind of winding down, Nintendo's starting to announce a bunch of stuff again.
The what?
Pandemic.
I
don't
know what you're talking about.
I'm vaccinated. Yeah.
Hashtag get vaxxed.
No blood clots yet, but whatever. Don't care. I pre-ordered this months ago, and when I pre-ordered it months ago, I was hoping that by the time it came out, I would have a job, so I wouldn't be playing this game and also be unemployed. But you know what? Here we are, and we've all had to accept our circumstances in trying times. So in 2 weeks, will be playing the new Pokemon Snap as an unemployed 30-plus-year-old man.
Well, I demand, since we've both been vaccinated, I demand to see the new Pokemon Snap game, because the Pokemon Snap of my youth, was that in 64?
It was on 64, yeah. It was over 20 years ago.
Jesus Christ. Yeah, no, this is a great game. It's a great game. Because I didn't like playing Pokemon.
Yeah.
I just thought all the characters looked cool. So they're like, just take pictures of them. I'm like, hell yeah. Hell yeah.
Yeah. And you used to be able to go to Blockbuster and print them out in like a kiosk.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Yeah.
At least
you can't do it anymore.
No shit.
Yep.
All right, Mike. Well, for next week, I think we're going to stay in 1995, and we're going to revisit the Paul W.S. Anderson classic Mortal Kombat before the new Mortal Kombat comes out on the 23rd on HBO Max and in theaters.
Get over here, one and all.
Yes, and I believe this is a personal favorite of yours. I have never seen this film. I think
Classic.
I've seen snippets of it. But a lot of people are big fans of it, and of course, the music lives on to this day as just legendary.
Yep.
Mid '90s like techno pop film score. So, looking forward to seeing that this week and discussing it with you next week. And like I said, appreciate you coming on. And you can find more of Mike, the Name Taken podcast, on all the socials. You can subscribe to Subject to Blackout on any of your favorite podcast distributors. And of course, you can always visit the website and listen to us there. Mike, I want to thank you again for coming out, and we'll talk to each other next week.
Cheers.